Hi everybody, Adrian Plass here,
Yes, and Bridget, hello.
and this is number 264 in Sounding the Shallows, isn't it?
Yeah, we've given up trying to think of any good reasons for these numbers, haven't we?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
there is one.
We've had one or two lovely emails in response to the laughter that we talked about last week, didn't we?
We were talking about why we've used laughter over the years and how it's used and what its value might be and all that sort of thing. I don't know if this was exactly a response to that, but it was someone who's reached a point in life, a really useful email actually, but a point in, because we hear a lot about this now, who through illness and other things has reached a point where it's very hard to see where you go from here and what you're going to do next and how you do it. And this person is talking about writing and where do you go with it? I mean, a number of really, really good questions. I mean,
Can you remember what the questions were?
well, one of the questions was about the fact that the person who wrote is a prolific reader. Says, does it help? Well, of course it does, because I mean, one of the only I'm sure there have been people who aren't prolific readers who've become fantastic writers, but enjoying books and reading them anyway is training you really in creating words, the use of words that is really entertaining or attractive.
Well,
or
inspires
useful.
you, catches.
You,
I mean, because when you're reading a lot, it's very hard, when you think of a small child trying to understand the mystery of the fact that those shapes on the page can become something that becomes alive in your mind. And you can see people, and you've got colours in your mind, and you've got all sorts of things going on, really. It can move you, it can make you angry, all those things from words written on a page.
It's very puzzling, the whole thing, because, as I've often said, I love the Enid Blyton stories about the children.
Famous Five and
well, mine were the Island of Adventure, the Valley of Adventure.
Course, yes.
And the thing about them, as I'm tediously repeating myself, because it interests me so much, is that I was absolutely enthralled by them. I mean, but I think I actually wrote most of them myself, because Enid Blyton created a framework within which I filled in all sorts of yearnings and feelings and sadnesses and joys in myself.
Yeah.
And then as I got older and I looked back at them, I thought, where is it all? Where's it gone? And of course it was in me. But I'm not saying that's what always happens. But
no, because there must be people. I mean, you think of artists who had never known anything about art, but it was inside them. I mean, surely some of these gifts given to us, we have particular areas where maybe it's already in there waiting to come out, do you think, or not?
I don't know what that quite means, but yeah, I suppose so.
No, I don't know what it quite means either, but...
Anyway, another question was, how do you become one? Well, that's much more difficult, really, because a lot of people want to become one, a writer, that is. And some of it's kind of... I mean, I can only talk about me because I haven't been anyone else. I mean, I always loved books. I always loved words. I was far too lazy to do any real writing for years and years and years.
You did write a very profound poem when you were young about a bee. Do you remember?
No, the world is very big and round, and in it many things are found, e.g. a bee.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, that was my gift to the world. Anyway, I became one because a gap opened in my life, but as has in this person's life, obviously. And that was one of the ways of dealing with some of the things that were happening to me. I mean, so there are no rules.
No, there aren't. And also, if you think about the fact this person writing to you, it struggles with an illness as well. There are all sorts of factors that go with that, aren't there?
That's right, yeah.
There's tiredness. There's all sorts of things that create additional problems, but then maybe everybody's got additional problems of some sort that you have to overcome if you're going to focus.
As we'll say later, you need to somehow find a passion in yourself that fuels you, or it's going to be a very tedious job, really. We'll come back to that, though. And then another thing this person said is about particular skills. I don't know. I mean, some writers who wrote books that have become like Lord of the Rings, you know.
By hand?
Not Lord of the Rings, sorry.
Oh.
The thing on the island, you know.
The thing on the island?
Yeah, where all the children are trapped on the island.
Lord of the Flies.
No, Lord of the Flies.
You were going to say Lord of the Rings
Well, it was
again.
Flies or
Can
Rings.
Yes,
Anyway,
no,
Lord of
it's
the
a
Flies.
very different book and much shorter.
Lord of the Flies. When that copy for that book went in, it was awful, and it had to be really worked on by people. So the passion and the idea are probably more important than having actual writing skills. But if you don't develop writing skills, it's going to be very hard work.
And if you're not slammed down by, I mean, you said interestingly about Lord of the Flies, and really, you know, obviously somebody, I remember somebody caught it, somebody thought this is brilliant, and worked with the writer to produce something that was brilliant.
Yeah,
the idea was brilliant.
Yeah, that's happened a lot, I think, actually, to people. Another question was, what would I write about? We just mentioned passion and the fact in my own case, what I write sound like what's his name? Morecambe and Wise, Ernie Wise. That thing's what I write about. What I write about really needs to entertain me, or I don't want to write it. I mean, occasionally you're writing things that are not that exciting, but you do them because they're part of
I mean,
the job.
that's interesting, isn't it? Because at the moment we've got Wimbledon, and we see people who are just beginning with an enormous amount of excitement. And there's a young guy who's just played the number one seed with enormous excitement, because how can it be that this thing that you've worked on your own and thought you were pretty good at, but not really know how good you are, suddenly you've leapt into something, but you're going to go back to being the person you were. It's not a full-time job. And then you see people who are coming to the end of their careers who look as though they've lost that joy and excitement of coming onto a court. Well, of course they have, because it's become a profession. And there's one player, Adrian, who reminds me rather of Harriet's dogs, you know, where, if you remember in the story, there's one sheepdog that's got much older and always used to be the fastest to run to the gate to bark at the visitor. And then there are puppies, and they're faster, and the desperation in the eyes of keeping up with that. And you do see that sometimes, don't you, with players who are coming to the end of a career and for whom it's a profession that's lost its passion and joy. So how do you keep that passion and that joy?
You do see it in Christian publications, or much more so in the 80s and the 90s, where someone had written four books and was getting weary because they'd written the same book 4 times. It was what they used to call echo books at one time. And I remember deciding to write a book of short stories which were rather dark immediately after a book that was very funny. And some people bought the second book and then brought it back to the shop and wanted their money back.
It's not funny.
But it was exactly the right thing to do. But anyway,
No, you were saying about passion. I mean, you were saying, I mean, and the slight problem when you come to having to write things because you're commissioned to write them, and the passion isn't quite there. Weren't you writing in Bacon Sandwiches about daily Bible notes?
Yeah, I'll come back to that in a moment. Probably just say that the early on, I wrote a letter to someone who ought to know and did, who wrote back and said, and I sent something I'd written, and he said, well, you write well, but you need a good idea. And I was a little miffed in a way, because I thought, I'm sure I have lots of ideas, but he was absolutely right. I mean, if something's going to really take off from inside you, it's got to be an idea that, well, not only appeal to you, but and the passion thing is connected with that, isn't it? I know I'm boring over this, but I'm constantly quoting C.S. Lewis saying, if you want to be original, don't try to be original, because you won't be. But if you write about the thing you write with your own passion, then it will be different from anybody else's writing. An awful lot of books that are sermons to yourself or books that have been written several times before. And maybe you had to be slightly mad to step out of that and write something that is... I mean, the person who wrote to me probably has very singular and personal views on the things that have happened that really would be interesting to... I don't know. That's just a thought. I don't know. And yeah, you were just saying just now, years ago, I wrote a book called Bacon Sandwiches and Salvation, which was supposed to cover the entire Christian world.
Well, they are very important.
Oh, very important, yes.
Fundamental to life. Bacon sandwiches and salvation.
Both of those, yeah. They're about the same level, aren't they? And it's all alphabetical. And D was for Daily Bible Notes, wasn't it? And we have both written...
I hadn't written any
Bible
at that
notes,
time. No, I
but
haven't.
we'll see what our differences are in a minute about that. But this was my definition: daily Bible notes, pieces of prose written in a deadline-driven, panic-stricken fever of hopeless despair at the very last possible moment, so that readers of the notes will be able to take a step back from their busy schedules and relax with God each day. Well, it's a bit of an exaggeration, but
well, I don't know.
It's only just.
Yeah, I mean, do you remember the person who had to write a prayer for every day of the year and said they
yes.
ended up with pieces of paper all over the floor,
over the bedroom
because
floor.
you didn't want to say the same thing, but
That's
actually
right.
saying something different. And also, that was a very good example of what on earth was that really about prayer?
Yeah,
Because
that's
talk
right.
about losing your passion, talking about the idea of prayer being that you go and actually talk to God about things seemed to have rather gone.
I always remember that as a terrible thought. All these bits of paper. It's a bit like that TV program, isn't it? Would I lie to you?
Oh yes.
Where the two main participants must spend their lives thinking something else must have happened to me that I could.
That I haven't already told. Keeping a list of every tiny thing. Yes.
But our Bible notes, now, you've also written a lot of Bible notes, so have I, but our methods are very different, aren't they?
Come on then. What
Well,
are these differences?
Broadly speaking, I mean, there is a sort of panic-driven thing in me that says, if you don't write the damn things, they're not going to happen.
I don't think that's the word to use, really, in connection with writing Bible notes.
No. But I care about what I write very much, but I have always wanted to sit down on a Tuesday or whatever it is and finish them on Wednesday, because I learned that if I focused my attention solidly on it, I could do it. I could do it in 48 hours.
Yeah.
But that's because of the way I'm made.
Well, it's also actually because it was your profession by then, in a way. I mean, you would get up. You were remarkably disciplined, actually. I mean, I remember it well because that isn't where we're at now. But you would get up, walk the dog, have some ideas while you were walking the dog, which she didn't care about at all. But I mean, it was a beautiful walk. And then you'd come back and you'd sit down at your desk by 9 o'clock and you would work. And that is very different from many people who are who are not professionals. It's like, I mean, coming back to Wimbledon, they're not going to get there. They're not going to be playing at Wimbledon if they're doing it bits in the evenings or early mornings while doing all sorts of other things. So that's definitely one difference, and I think that is a problem for people who are just beginning to do something like writing or any other area of, that you have the passion, but you've also got to have the skill, and the honing of those skills it involves a huge amount of time. I mean, what is it about snooker players or professional piano players or whatever it is? It's hours and hours every day.
It is.
And that was honing the skill of writing, wasn't it, for you?
Yeah. And your method?
Well, I would
yours
argue
is just
that,
as valid.
No,
whatever
I
you
would
do.
argue that I had to fit it in. But I mean, far be it from me to... No, I am different from you. I couldn't possibly have done that. I have to have an idea and sort of knead it like I was making a loaf of bread until I came to something that I thought might work, and write that one, and then have another idea and think about that one. Yes, of course we're different. We're very different people.
No, but isn't it interesting that the result is irrelevant? I mean, what I'm saying is that this person who's written to me will have to approach it in the way that they're made.
Exactly, and
not despair because it isn't the same as somebody else.
No, well, I mean, one of the most beautiful writers that we know is our banana hater in chief, who writes absolutely stunningly, but has to work with a tiny capsule, a minute capsule of energy in order to, and all sorts of other complications in order to be able to do that. So it isn't. Yes, it is deciding what you can do in any area really. But if you're not enjoying it, if that idea is not there, then it can become very dried up, can't it? And I mean, I'm thinking now, about your professional Christians, your preachers, your leaders, who have to come up with something every week. And I know you've been very glad that you put off becoming a vicar, because the idea of having to come up with something, would not have suited you at all.
Terrible vicar. One other thing I thought was worth saying was that the collection of scraps is very important. And by that I mean I always kept a thing called an ideas file.
Yes, you also kept a pile of receipts from things on which you'd written things
true.
on the back.
Well, I soon learned that that's the hopeless. So
going through your pockets and finding odd bits of rubbish in which you'd written things.
And almost impossible to remember what they were about. But it is actually very helpful because...
An ideas file, yeah.
It means that you do hold on to things. And not so that you can, which is awful, plucking them out and forcing them into something because you think it's so wonderful. But when it actually helps and is part of it. But the business of trapping your thoughts and feelings as they fly past is crucial.
That's such a good way of putting it, and that's why the dog walks. And you'd come home from a dog walk, and you needed to catch that, didn't you?
I'm very bad at keeping it in my head. I have to make a note of it. But people have often said to me, I thought I'd do this, and they use a phrase which is brilliant, and I say, well, that phrase is excellent. They say, oh no, I wouldn't call it that. And there is a temptation to resist. What is it? Things that don't seem to fit with the context in which you hope something will be read.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's really got to feel free to look at what you're thinking and feeling, and use that as the place where you gather material for what you're going to do.
I know we've talked sometimes, haven't we? We've suggested to people in all sorts of different contexts that they Google their minds, that you just allow randomly the things that pop into your mind. You never know. They might not have a place. It might be to do with whether you like scones. I mean, it might be something as silly as that.
No, I think
but allowing the fact
amazing,
that
really.
idea has come into your mind. Yeah.
Well, if you remember, we've done this with groups before, and we did one with a group and asked them to. I can't remember.
I know what it was. It was Mary.
Mary. It was Mary. That's right. Mary, the mother of Jesus.
Because a lot of people are so panicked by the idea of looking at Mary. Because they're worried that they might start revering her, worshipping her or praying to her. So but there is a panic in Protestant Christians that they might end up, creating something in their mind. So getting past...
if you remember, one of the people who did have that fear actually said, I remember I was doing some work with some people and I was about to make a joke about Mary that wasn't really a very good thing to say. And he said, I felt as though a pair of hands were put over my ears.
Yes.
And not really thought about it much before. It's just you get into these habits of perception about people, places, things, and they're not good for writing. Because you really need to have permission to step out a bit.
I'm quite sure that anybody listening to this whose area is painting, for example, would agree with you.
Yeah.
That, you still have to hone the skills, though, and that's the boring bit. Then that can involve allowing other people in on it. I mean, you talked about the guy with the Lord of the Flies. You need a good editor. You don't need somebody who's just going to steamroller all over it, but you need somebody who can see something and help you to, and that isn't an easy process, is it, Mr. Plass? I mean, even a good editor you find hard, because it can be the bit you'd worked on and thought was the best bit that they suggest maybe isn't, or maybe those things are quite hard. But writing, having somebody supporting you, and back to Wimbledon, you can see that the people who have developed a team around them that support them, as well as criticising them, loving them, putting up with them, all the rest of it.
Good questions from people like that. And I'm going to go back to something I think we mentioned on one of these so long ago, about the director who said to the man writing the music for his film, "Does the harp know that she's going to die?"
Oh gosh, yes.
And so that question doesn't say anything. What it does is make you think, what does he mean by that? And should I look at that? And what is the answer to that question?
Well, and even if you never understand it, allowing it to stay there instead of dismissing it, and then maybe you will understand it, or you will get something out of it.
Yeah. And a final point, I was very fortunate in one sense, because I met an idol of mine, which is Malcolm Muggeridge, who no one seems to have heard of anymore, who was a great writer, and we went into his study, and he talked about his writing and how he does it, and he said, I write my slab every day of 1,000 words, and then I correct it and make it the way I want it to be.
And that was actually before you begun to write,
Before I began to write.
Yeah.
When I did start to write, I remembered that, and that's what I did. And it was really, really helpful to have a discipline that said, do that much, and if possible, finish on and up.
Yeah, I found that very interesting.
Finish when you like what you're writing and you'd like to go on.
And you'd like to go on, but you stop.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you had 4 children. That was a fairly strong reason for stopping when they all came home. But even if you haven't, to have that discipline to say, no, I'm going to stop now. I'm not going to write while I'm exhausted and miserable and whatever. I will stop, and maybe I have to rewrite those words the next day. Yeah.
But going back to our writer, our correspondent, thank you very much for writing your email.
Yeah, it triggered off lots of ideas in
lots of thoughts, and have a look at it. Just sit and think about it. Sit on a hillside and just think, if I was going to write about something, what would I write? And as ideas float around your head, don't bat them away, because there is no right way. There is no right thing to be thinking. And it says in the Bible, Jesus said to the people in the locked room, or it says he opened their minds. And one of our tasks, I think, as Christian writers, whatever that is to open people's minds.
And open your own.
I wish you the very, very best with it. I really
and
do.
We'd love to hear from you. I'm sure we're going to hear some real things that stimulate us and that we can then use to stimulate you. So we'll speak to you again next week. Bye.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being with us.